Undercover CEO found a security guard studying by flashlight. What happened next changed his life. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to our main character. On a cold October night, deep inside an underground parking garage beneath a downtown office building, a young man named Evan Cole sat on the concrete floor with his back against a support pillar. The air smelled faintly of engine oil and damp cement, and the flickering fluorescent lights above cast long shadows that stretched across the parked cars. Evan wore a navy hoodie pulled over his head, his hands tucked into the sleeves for warmth. His backpack lay beside him, battered and faded, its zipper barely holding together. Resting on his lap was a thick textbook, pages filled with circled formulas and highlighted notes. He glanced at his watch, 11:42 p.m., and exhaled slowly. Another night studying during his shift. Another night trying to hold his life together. He was a night security guard assigned to patrol 4 levels of the garage, but during the slower hours he tried to squeeze in study time. Engineering was his dream. College was the path. But juggling tuition, rent, and the medical bills he inherited after his mother passed left him with a bank account that never stayed above double digits. Still, he kept going. Because quitting meant accepting a life he refused to settle for. He reached for his thermos, unscrewed the cap, and took a sip of lukewarm coffee, his third refill of the night. The bitter taste didn't bother him anymore. It kept him awake, and that was enough. As he turned a page, a gust of cold air swept through the garage. He looked up. Someone had just stepped out of the elevator, heels clicking sharply against the concrete. Evan straightened. Late-night foot traffic was rare here. Approaching him was a woman in a long gray coat, her blonde hair tied neatly in a twist, her stride steady and confident. She looked like someone who belonged on the top floor of a corporate tower, not in a dim garage after midnight. Evan quickly closed his book and stood, adjusting his badge. "Evening, ma'am. Everything all right?" he asked. The woman stopped a few feet from him, studying him with a curious expression rather than concern. "I could ask you the same thing," she replied softly. "Studying on the clock?" Evan swallowed, unsure if she was joking or accusing. "Only during downtime. I make sure the rounds are done first." "I figured," she said, glancing at the open textbook on the ground. "Most people who slack off don't highlight this much." Before he could respond, her phone buzzed. She checked the screen, sighed, then looked back at him. "What's your name?" "Evan. Evan Cole." She nodded. "I'm Lila Hart." The name struck something faintly familiar, but Evan couldn't place it. She reached into her coat and handed him a small card. A business card, thick, embossed, undeniably expensive. "You should not be studying down here at midnight," she said. "Not because you're breaking the rules, but because someone with this kind of determination shouldn't be invisible." Evan blinked, confused. "Ma'am, come to the 21st floor tomorrow at noon. Ask for me." Before he could ask anything else, she turned and walked toward a black SUV waiting near the exit. The driver rushed out to open her door. Evan looked down at the card in his hand. Lila Hart, Interim Chief Executive Officer, Hartwell Innovations. His breath caught. Hartwell Innovations was one of the largest engineering firms on the West Coast. He looked back up just in time to see the SUV pull away. For a long moment, all he could do was stare at the empty ramp where it disappeared. Why would someone like her want to talk to someone like him? As he sat back down on the cold concrete, the card still warm from her hand, one thought pulsed through his mind. This meeting could change everything, or it could break him in ways he wasn't ready for. But either way, tomorrow at noon, he would find out. The next morning, Evan woke up with barely 3 hours of sleep, his mind looping through every detail of the encounter with Lila Hart. The embossed business card lay on his small kitchenette counter, catching the morning light like it was some kind of golden ticket. He kept staring at it, half convinced it might disappear if he looked away for too long. Noon, 21st floor. He repeated it over and over while brushing his teeth, packing his backpack, and throwing on a clean shirt that he hoped looked somewhat professional. His shift ended at 10 a.m., giving him exactly 2 hours to calm his nerves, rehearse what he might say, and somehow convince himself he belonged inside a skyscraper filled with people who probably made more in a week than he made in 3 months. By 11:45 a.m., Evan stood in front of the shimmering glass building where Hartwell Innovations occupied the top floors. The revolving doors reflected his own anxious face back at him. He took a deep breath, pushed inside, and tried not to look as out of place as he felt. The lobby ceiling arched 40 feet high, with cascading light fixtures that looked like frozen waterfalls. People in tailored suits moved with purpose, tapping on tablets, greeting each other with polished smiles. Evan silently prayed no one would ask him for directions. He approached the reception desk where a woman with dark hair pulled into a sleek bun looked up. Her nameplate read Carmen. I am here to see Ms. Lila Hart," Evan said, trying to keep his voice steady. Carmen's expression shifted instantly. "Your name?" "Evan Cole." She typed into her system, glanced at the screen, and then looked back at him with a small smile. "She is expecting you. Take elevator C to the 21st floor." Expecting him? Evan swallowed hard, thanked her, and walked toward the elevator bank where walls of brushed steel gleamed. The elevator ride was smooth and silent. Too silent. He could hear his heartbeat louder than the soft hum of the machinery. When the doors opened, he stepped into a hallway lined with glass walls, showcasing modern offices with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It felt like stepping into another world, a world built for success, ambition, and the kind of people who never had to choose between groceries and electricity bills. A woman in a navy suit approached him. "You must be Evan. Miss Hart is waiting inside the conference room." She led him to a glass door, opened it, and gestured for him to enter. Evan took a breath and stepped inside. Lila Hart stood near the window, her coat off now, sleeves rolled up as. She reviewed several large architectural renderings spread across the table. Sunlight framed her like a halo, giving her an air of effortless authority. She looked up the moment she sensed his presence. "Evan, right on time." She smiled warmly, and the tension in his shoulders loosened just a bit. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting me," he replied, feeling the stiffness in his voice. Lila gestured toward a chair. "Sit. We have a lot to talk about." He sat, unsure where to place his hands, eventually opting to intertwine them on the table. Lila remained standing, picking up a thick blueprint rolled into a tube. "Tell me something," she said. "Why were you studying engineering textbooks in a parking garage at nearly midnight?" The question hit him harder than he expected. "Because," Evan began, then paused, trying to find the right words, "because I do not really have a lot of options. Between rent and leftover medical bills, paying for school is a stretch. So I take the night shift because it pays better and leaves my days open for classes. But, well, textbooks do not care if you are tired." Lila watched him closely, not judging, just listening. Really listening. "And what made you choose engineering?" Evan hesitated again, this time because the answer meant something to him. "My mom used to say that engineering was the art of solving problems you could touch. She believed that creating something that helped other people was worth dedicating a life to. After she passed, it felt like the only thing that still made sense." Lila's expression softened. "I am sorry about your mom." Evan nodded silently. Lila placed the blueprint on the table and folded her arms. "I saw something in you last night," she said. "Most security guards I meet are just trying to get through their shift. But you were grinding. Focused. Determined. I respect that." Evan felt heat rise to his face, and he was glad the sunlight made it harder to notice. "Thank you. Here is why I called you here," she continued. "Hartwell Innovations runs a mentorship and scholarship program for young engineers who show potential. Until last night, we had already completed this year's selection process." Evan's stomach dropped a little. "Already completed? However," she added, stepping closer, "I am considering adding one more candidate." Evan stared at her. "Why me?" "Because raw determination is rarer than talent," Lila said plainly. "And you have both." Evan opened his mouth, but no words came. She smiled at his stunned expression. "Do not get excited yet. I am not offering anything today. I need to see what you are capable of." "Which means a test." Evan straightened. "A test?" "Yes," Lila said. "And if you pass, you earn something more valuable than a scholarship." Evan swallowed nervously. "What is that?" "A chance," she said softly. "A real one." And with those words, She set in motion a chain of events that would change everything he thought he knew about his future. For a long moment, Evan sat frozen in his chair, unsure if he had heard Lila correctly. A test. A chance. Words that felt too big, too heavy, for someone who had been studying under flickering garage lights only 12 hours earlier. Lila walked to the other side of the conference table, picked up a folder, and placed it in front of him. "Open it," she said. Evan lifted the cover, revealing a design blueprint for a structural support system he had never seen before. Complex angles, pressure tolerances, and load distributions were detailed with precision that made his textbooks look like children's drawings. "This," she explained, "is a prototype for a community shelter design we are trying to refine. It is meant to withstand severe weather conditions, particularly in low-income neighborhoods prone to storms and flooding. The idea is simple: build safety that people can actually afford." She paused, watching him absorb the information. "Your task is to review the model and identify potential points of failure. You have 72 hours. Evan blinked. 72 hours? "You will not be doing construction," she added with a small smile. "Just analysis. I want to see how you think." He ran his fingers along the edge of the blueprint, overwhelmed but oddly excited. "I can try," he said quietly. "I will do my best." "I know you will," she replied, and for some reason, hearing her say that made something stir in his chest. "You can work here. We will give you temporary clearance and access to the engineering software. If you need assistance or run into inconsistencies, ask for me directly." He nodded. "Thank you." "And Evan," she added as he stood to leave, "this is not about perfection. It is about potential. Show me who you really are." He carried the folder out of the room as if it were fragile glass. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of new faces, borrowed office space, and hours spent studying the blueprint from every angle. By 8 p.m., the office had mostly emptied, leaving only the faint hum of overhead lights and the quiet tapping of Evan's keyboard. He leaned over the printout, tracing a load-bearing path, mind racing through stress calculations. He scribbled notes, crossed them out, wrote them again, comparing traditional brace structures with hybrid systems he remembered from a lecture 3 semesters ago. At one point, he stepped back from the desk, rubbing his eyes. "What am I doing?" he whispered to himself. "Working among engineers who are probably 10 times smarter than me." But then he remembered his mother's voice, warm and reassuring. "Engineering is the art of solving problems you can touch." He exhaled, sat back down, and kept going. Around 9:15 p.m., he heard footsteps. He looked up to see Lila walking toward him with 2 paper cups in hand. "You have been here for hours," she said, placing 1 cup beside him. "You need this more than I do." "Coffee?" he asked. "No," she replied. "Chamomile tea. You are already jittery enough from stress alone." He laughed softly, surprised she had noticed. She pulled up a chair. "So," she said, leaning slightly over the blueprint, "what have you found?" Evan hesitated. "A few things, but I do not know if I am interpreting them correctly." "Show me," she encouraged. He pointed to a cluster of intersecting support beams. "The lateral load distribution looks fine on paper, but if these beams are too lightweight, they will bend under repeated stress. And the drainage system, if it gets clogged even once, pressure could build up behind this wall." Lila's brows lifted slightly. "Most first-year interns do not catch that." "I am not most interns," he said before he could stop himself. She smiled. "No, you are not." They spent the next 20 minutes discussing design possibilities, and every time Evan explained his thought process, Lila listened closely, nodding along, sometimes adding insights, but never dismissing his ideas. It felt unreal, like being seen for the first time. When she finally stood to leave, she placed a hand on the blueprint. "You are on the right track. Keep going." After she left, Evan stared at the empty doorway for a moment before sitting again, feeling something warm settle in his chest. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. Someone powerful saw value in him. Someone who could change his entire future believed he had potential. At midnight, he packed up his notes and headed out of the building. The cold night air hit his face, waking his tired senses. As he walked toward the bus stop, blueprint tube slung over his shoulder, he whispered to himself, 72 hours. I can do this. But he had no idea that the test in front of him would reveal more than just engineering skill. It would uncover a truth that would shake everything he thought he knew about Lila Hart. and about the world he had just stepped into. The next morning, Evan woke up with a knot in his stomach and the blueprint tube still resting beside his bed, like a silent reminder of the responsibility he was carrying. He dragged himself to the kitchen, splashed cold water on his face, and brewed a cup of cheap instant coffee. The clock read 7:12 a.m. He had barely slept, but his mind was already racing with structural equations and possible reinforcement strategies. By 8:30 a.m., he was back inside the 21st floor of Hartwell Innovations, scanning his badge at the temporary workstation assigned to him. The air smelled faintly of fresh paper and expensive wood polish, and employees moved around with a sense of confidence that made him feel both inspired and intimidated. He opened his laptop, spread out his notes, and dove straight into work. Hours passed unnoticed. He ran simulations, adjusted variables, and flipped back and forth between hand calculations and software models. He was so absorbed in his work that he did not realize someone had approached until a soft voice interrupted his concentration. "You are here early." Evan turned and saw Lila standing beside him, a tablet in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. She wore a navy blouse and black trousers, her hair pulled into a sleek low bun. She looked tired, but still impossibly polished. "Could not sleep," Evan admitted. "My mind kept thinking about the beams and the drainage system." Lila smiled. "That is a sign you are taking this seriously." "Good." She set the coffee cup beside him. "You look like you needed something stronger." "Then chamomile tea today." He let out a breath he did not know he was holding. "Thank you." Lila glanced at his screen. "Show me what you have so far." Evan walked her through his findings, pointing out stress concentrations and potential weak points. She nodded thoughtfully, occasionally asking questions that forced him to articulate his reasoning more clearly. After several minutes, she leaned back slightly, impressed. "You have a natural grasp of structural integrity. That is rare without formal training." "I had training," he said. "Just interrupted." She looked at him curiously, as if sensing there was more to the story, but before she could ask, her assistant knocked on the doorframe. "Ms. Hart, your 9 o'clock meeting is ready." Lila gave a small sigh. "Duty calls." She gathered her tablet, but before leaving, she said, "Keep going. I want to see the full analysis by this afternoon." After she disappeared through the hallway, Evan returned to his work with renewed focus. But as the hours stretched on, he began to notice something odd. Several times, he caught glimpses of men in dark suits walking past the glass walls, glancing at him before muttering into their earpieces. At first he thought they were security personnel, but their eyes lingered too long, their expressions too guarded. Around noon, while he was adjusting the design's load-bearing model, he heard a voice behind him. "You are the security guard from the garage, right?" Evan turned to see a middle-aged man with silver hair and a rigid posture standing behind him. His suit was perfectly tailored, and his expression cold. "Yes," Evan replied cautiously. "My name is Evan." The man did not shake his hand. Instead, he scanned the scattered blueprints with a disapproving eye. "And you are working in our restricted engineering department because—" The question held suspicion, not curiosity. Evan straightened. "Because Ms. Hart asked me to assist with the structural analysis." The man's eyebrows lifted a fraction. "Did she now?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Let me be perfectly clear. This department handles sensitive projects. We do not bring in unvetted outsiders. Whatever arrangement Ms. Hart has made with you is highly unusual." Evan's pulse quickened. "I am only here to help. That is all." The man stared at him for a long, tense moment before giving a tight, forced smile. "Keep your distance from her. For your own." "Good." And with that, he walked away, his polished shoes clicking against the floor like a warning. Evan sat frozen, unsure whether he had just been threatened, evaluated, or dismissed. Maybe all three. He tried to return to work, but his mind kept replaying the man's words. Who was he? Why did he care? And what did he mean by unvetted outsiders? At 3 p.m., Lila returned, expecting an update. Evan handed her the revised blueprint, but he could not hide the unease on his face. She noticed immediately. "What happened?" she asked. He hesitated. "A man came by earlier. Silver hair. Sharp suit. He said I should keep my distance from you." The warmth drained from Lila's expression, replaced by something colder, sharper. "Did he give his name?" "No," Lila exhaled slowly. "That was probably Damon Blackwell, the chief operations officer." The title alone made Evan's stomach twist. Did I do something wrong? No, Lila said firmly. But he thinks he can control more than he should. She shook her head. Ignore him. Focus on your work. I will deal with Damon. Evan nodded, but the tension lingered. And as he looked down at the blueprint, he sensed what he had feared since the moment he stepped into Hartwell Innovations. This opportunity was bigger than he realized. And so were the dangers hiding behind glass walls and polished floors. That night, long after most employees had gone home, Evan remained at his workstation, poring over diagrams and simulation results. The office around him was dim except for the warm glow of his desk lamp. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the face of Damon Blackwell, the chief operations officer who had warned him earlier. Damon's cold expression lingered like a shadow, making Evan's stomach tighten each time he replayed the encounter. Still, he forced himself to push the anxiety aside. He had a task. 72 hours. Show your potential. He repeated Lila's words like a mantra as he typed another round of calculations. At 10:17 p.m., the soft hum of the elevator made him look up. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, steady and purposeful. For a moment, he feared it was Damon again. But when the figure appeared in the doorway, relief washed over him. It was Lila. She carried 2 containers of food in a paper bag, her coat draped over her arm. You did not leave. For dinner, she said with a half-smile. So I brought dinner to you. Evan blinked, surprised. You did not have to do that. I know, she replied, placing the food on the table. But if you collapse from hunger, my schedule will be a disaster. So this is self-preservation on my part. He laughed quietly, and the tension in his chest loosened. They sat side by side at the small conference table. Lila opened her container and took a bite before nodding toward his blueprint notes. Tell me where you are now. Evan outlined his latest findings, tracing the flaw he had discovered in the load-bearing axis and the alternative support design he was developing. As he spoke, his confidence grew. This was the part he loved, the puzzle, the logic, the building of something that mattered. When he finished, Lila tapped her chopsticks against the edge of her container. You know, she said, I have interviewed dozens of intern candidates over the years. Some were brilliant. Some were overconfident. Some had impressive resumes. She looked at him with sincerity. None of them had your drive. Evan felt heat rising in his face. I am just trying to do my best. And that, she said softly, is exactly why I noticed you. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The office was quiet except for the distant hum of the ventilation system. Then Lila stood and walked toward the window, gazing out at the city lights glittering below. You should know something, she said after a long pause. My position here is not as stable as it looks. Evan frowned. What do you mean? She kept her eyes on the skyline. I am the interim chief executive officer. My father built this company, but after he passed, the board was split. Some want me to lead permanently. Others do not. Evan immediately thought of Damon Blackwell. Including the chief operations officer? Lila nodded. Damon believes I am too young, too idealistic, and too willing to take risks. He wants the company for himself, even if he smiles politely in public. She turned to face him. So when I brought you in, it was not just unusual. It was provocative. Evan felt a chill crawl down his spine. I did not mean to cause trouble. You did not, she said firmly. Damon is threatened by anything I choose without his input. You, being here, just exposed that insecurity. She walked back to him, standing closer than before, her voice lower now. But I do not regret choosing you. Evan swallowed. Why tell me all this? Because you deserve to understand the environment you stepped into. And because I need you to be careful. Some people in this building care more about power than progress. Her words hung heavy in the air. Evan looked at the blueprint, suddenly aware that his test was bigger than engineering. It was tangled in office politics, egos, and a struggle for control he had not known existed. If things get complicated, he said quietly, you do not have to protect me. I am used to standing on my own. Lila shook her head. You should not have to do that anymore. He looked up at her, surprised by the warmth in her eyes. She placed a gentle hand on the edge of his blueprint, the smallest gesture, yet it carried weight. Finish the analysis, she said. Show me what you can do. Not for the board. Not for Damon. For yourself. Evan nodded slowly. I will. She gathered her coat, preparing to leave. Before stepping out, she said one more thing. And Evan, do not let anyone make you feel small here. Not Damon. Not the board. Not the system. Then she disappeared down the hallway, her footsteps echoing softly until they faded. Evan remained seated, staring at the blueprint, feeling the enormity of everything pressing against his chest. This was no longer just a chance to prove himself. This was a crossroads, a test not only of skill, but of courage. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that the storm inside Hartwell Innovations was only just beginning. The next 2 days unfolded in a blur of calculations, late nights, and quiet determination as Evan threw himself into completing the structural analysis. By the final morning of his 72-hour deadline, he felt the exhaustion deep in his bones, yet his mind was sharper than it had ever been. He had pushed himself harder than he thought possible, driven not just by ambition, but by the weight of Lila's trust and the threat that hovered around the company like a storm cloud. At 11:58 a.m., with only minutes left before his deadline, Evan gathered the final version of his report, clipped the pages together, and placed them neatly inside a presentation folder. He stared at the stack of papers, barely believing he had made it through. The blueprint had gone from intimidating to familiar. Every line, every load path, every stress point was etched into his mind. He took a deep breath, wiped his palms against his jeans, and stood. The walk to Lila's office felt longer than usual. Employees flowed around him, busy, focused, unaware of the anxiety building in his chest with each step. When he reached her door, he raised his hand to knock, only for the door to open abruptly. Lila's assistant stood there, startled. "Oh, Evan. Perfect timing. Ms. Hart just finished her earlier meeting. You can go in." Evan nodded, clutching the folder tightly as he stepped inside. Lila was standing by the large window, her hands tucked into the pockets of her blazer. She turned when she heard him, and a genuine smile touched her face. "Right on the dot. That is impressive." He exhaled the breath he had been holding and approached the desk. "I finished the analysis." He held out the folder. Lila gestured for him to sit as she opened it, her eyes scanning the pages with focused intensity. The office was silent except for the soft sound of pages turning. Evan watched her, unable to read her expression. His heart pounded like a drum inside his chest. After several long minutes, she closed the folder and rested both hands on top of it. "Evan," she said, "this is exceptional." His shoulders sagged in relief. "Really?" "Yes," she replied firmly. "The level of detail, the clarity of your reasoning, the solutions you proposed. This is not the work of a beginner. This is the work of someone who understands engineering beyond the surface level." His throat tightened. "Thank you. I gave it everything I had." Lila nodded. "And it shows." But then her expression shifted, just slightly, as if she were weighing something in her mind. "There is something you should know," she said quietly. "Damon requested access to your background file." Evan stiffened. "Why?" "He claims it is for compliance reasons," she said, her tone sharp with annoyance. "But I know exactly what he is doing. He is trying to find something, anything, he can use to undermine you, or question my judgment." Evan's stomach twisted. "I do not have anything to hide." "I know," Lila replied. "But Damon is not concerned with truth. He is concerned with control. And you being here represents something he cannot control." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You are not just a risk to him. You are a threat." Evan swallowed hard. "What should I do?" "Keep doing exactly what you are doing," she said. "You have done everything right. You have proven your capability. Now it is my job to protect the rest." She paused for a moment, looking at him more intently than before. "And Evan, you do not have to carry this alone." That warmth again, that sincerity he was not used to. It hit him deeper than he expected. Before he could respond, there was a loud, sharp knock on the door. The kind of knock that did not ask permission. It demanded it. Lila's jaw tightened. "Come in." The door opened, and Damon Blackwell stepped inside. His silver hair was perfectly combed, his suit crisp, his expression unreadable. His eyes flicked to Evan, then to the folder on Lila's desk. "I see the evaluation is complete," Damon said coolly. "Yes," Lila replied without missing a beat. "And it is excellent." Damon let out a quiet hum, the kind one made when doubting something silently. "I would like to review the report myself." "No," Lila said immediately. Evan blinked. Damon raised an eyebrow. "No. This project does not fall under your jurisdiction," she said. "And the internal evaluation remains confidential until I determine the next steps." Damon's gaze sharpened. You are making decisions without consulting the board again. I am interim chief executive officer, she replied calmly. This is my department. For a moment, the air crackled with tension. Damon glanced once more at Evan, a look filled with skepticism and something darker, territorial, almost predatory. Then he stepped back. Very well, he said stiffly. But remember, Miss Hart, every decision has consequences. He turned and left, closing the door with a soft but deliberate click. The silence that followed felt heavy. Lila exhaled slowly. Do not let him intimidate you, she said. Men like Damon only have power when you give it to them. Evan nodded, but the encounter left a sour weight in his chest. He finally asked, So what happens to me now? She lifted the folder again, tapping her fingers lightly against it. Now, she said, I take your report to the board. They will not like that I made a late addition to the candidate list, especially one they did not choose. But after reading this, she held it up slightly. I have ammunition. He forced a small smile. Is that good? It is necessary, she replied. And Evan, you are worth fighting for. His heart stopped. For a second, he forgot how to breathe. Then she turned away, signaling that the meeting was over. But the words stayed with him. Heavy, impossible, and full of meaning he did not yet understand. As he stepped out of her office, one truth settled deep in his bones. Whatever storm was brewing inside Hartwell Innovations, he was no longer standing on the outside. He was in the center of it. For the next several days, the atmosphere inside Hartwell Innovations shifted in a way Evan could feel even before he understood it. People who used to walk past him without a second glance now seemed to pause, their eyes scanning him with curiosity or suspicion, whispering quietly as he passed. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Word had spread. The security guard from the garage was now sitting inside the executive wing, working on a confidential structural project directly under the interim chief executive officer. And Damon Blackwell was not happy about it. That tension seeped into the walls like cold air. Yet Evan kept showing up, kept working, kept reminding himself why he was there. By the fourth day, Lila requested him to meet her in a small private conference room, one with frosted glass panels and a polished oak table. When he walked in, she looked tired, more tired than he had ever seen her. Papers were scattered across the table, along with her laptop and a half-finished cup of black coffee. Evan, she said softly, sit down. We need to talk. His stomach tightened. Is something wrong? She hesitated, then nodded. The board reviewed your analysis. Some of them were impressed. Others, she stopped, rubbing her forehead. Others are using it as ammunition. Evan felt a chill crawl across his arms. Ammunition? Against who? Against me, she admitted. They are claiming that I purposely broke protocol by bringing in an unqualified civilian to assist with a critical design project. Evan's throat tightened painfully. I never meant to cause trouble. If I had known. Do not blame yourself, she interrupted firmly. This is not about you. This is about board members who want to undermine my leadership, and they are willing to twist anything to do it. She slid a document across the table toward him. Read that. Evan picked it up. It was an internal memo, written coldly and clinically. Unauthorized personnel granted access to restricted engineering data. Temporary clearance issued without proper committee approval. Potential liability concerns resulting from deviation from standard hiring procedure. His chest clenched. They make it sound like I am dangerous. They do not care about truth, she said quietly. They care about leverage. He lowered the paper slowly. What happens now? Lila exhaled, the sound heavy. There is going to be an internal review. They want to evaluate my decision-making, and Damon is pushing for a vote to suspend my authority until the review is complete. Evan felt anger rise in him. Hot. Unexpected. He is blaming you for helping me. He is blaming me for thinking independently, she corrected. And you are simply a convenient target. She looked at him with an expression that made his chest ache. I want you to know something, Evan. I would make the same choice again. I do not regret bringing you into this. His voice was quiet. But you might lose your position because of me. Her eyes softened, and she shook her head. I might lose my position because certain people fear change. A heavy silence settled between them. Evan wanted to say something, anything, that would make this easier, but no words came. Finally, Lila stood up. Come with me. She led him down the hallway to a secured storage area where models of past engineering projects were displayed. She stopped in front of a scale model of a storm-resistant community shelter, the same project Evan had analyzed. This prototype was my father's idea, she said quietly. He believed engineering meant responsibility. You build things that can save lives, not just things that generate profit. Evan followed her gaze. That is what I want too. I know, she said. That is why I chose you. They stood there in silence, surrounded by the echo of Lila's father's legacy. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind them. Evan turned. Damon Blackwell approached with 2 board members flanking him. His expression was polished, polite, but cold. Ms. Hart, Damon said, the board is convening early. Your presence is required. Lila's jaw tightened. I was not notified of any schedule change. Consider this your notification, Damon replied. Then, his eyes slid to Evan with thinly veiled disdain. And you are to wait outside. This matter no longer concerns you. Evan wanted to step forward, to say something, but Lila placed a gentle hand on his arm, just enough pressure to ask him to stay calm. It is all right, she whispered. I will handle this. She walked past Damon without looking at him, her posture tall, dignified. Damon watched her go, then leaned slightly toward Evan. Do you understand now? He murmured. You do not belong in this world. And if you stay, you will burn with her. Evan stared at him, anger simmering just beneath the surface, but he did not speak. Damon smirked, as if satisfied, and followed the board members into the conference chamber. Evan was left standing alone in the quiet hallway, his fists clenched, his pulse racing. And for the first time since he had met Lila Hart, fear crept into his heart. Fear that she was fighting a battle he had accidentally made harder, and fear that she might lose. But beneath that fear, something else began to grow. Resolve, determination, and the rising certainty that he would not let her face this alone. While the board met behind the closed double doors, Evan waited outside, pacing the length of the hallway like a trapped animal. Every few minutes he stopped, listened, then resumed pacing, unable to calm the growing storm inside his chest. He could not hear the words being exchanged inside the room, but he could feel the tension radiating through the floor, through the walls, through the building's cold marble bones. He stared at the frosted glass panels, imagining Damon's calculated smile as he twisted the truth into a weapon, imagining Lila standing alone against a table full of people who wanted her gone. The thought made his pulse spike. He tried to distract himself by reviewing the structural blueprint in his mind, but even the familiar logic of engineering could not quiet the fear gnawing at him. After what felt like an eternity, but was only 40 minutes, the doors swung open. Several board members walked out, their expressions cold and unreadable, but none of them looked at him directly. Damon emerged last, wearing a satisfied, controlled grin. He paused beside Evan, his voice low and smooth. The board will deliberate, but I would not make any long-term plans here if I were you. Evan clenched his jaw. You do not scare me. Damon chuckled. Oh, I am not trying to scare you. I am trying to educate you. People like you do not last long in places built for people like me. He straightened his cuffs. And neither do people like Miss Hart. Evan refused to respond. Damon walked away, leaving the corridor colder than before. A minute later, Lila stepped out. She looked composed, but her eyes held exhaustion, the kind that settled into a person's bones. Evan approached her immediately. What happened? She took a slow breath. The board is reviewing my decisions. They will vote in 2 days. His heart sank. What does that mean for you? She looked at him with quiet honesty. It means they might remove me. Those words hit him harder than he expected. Lila, I am sorry. Do not apologize, she said gently. You did nothing wrong. They walked together toward her office, the city lights glowing faintly through the large windows as evening crept in. When they entered her office, she finally allowed the weight to show. She sank into her chair and rubbed her temples. My father used to tell me something, she murmured. He said leadership is not about being liked. It is about standing in front of the fire when everyone else hides behind it. Evan stepped closer, unsure if he had the right to speak, yet unable to stay silent. You do not deserve this. You are trying to do the right thing. She looked up at him, a sad smile forming. Trying is not always enough. But you are enough, he said before thinking, surprising both of them. A flicker of warmth passed through her eyes, but she quickly blinked it away. Evan, I need to tell you something important now. Something I should have told you earlier. His stomach tightened. What is it? She hesitated, then stood and walked toward the window, her silhouette outlined against the fading orange sky. There is more to this fight than the mentorship program or the blueprint project. Damon wants to shut down the shelter initiative entirely. He claims it is too expensive and not profitable. Evan froze. He wants to cancel it? Yes, she said. And your analysis. It proved the concept is solid. It proved the design is viable. If I present your findings at the final review, I can show the impact the project could have. It might save the initiative. Then let us use it, Evan said. But she shook her head. They will not accept it from me alone. They will say I manipulated the evaluation. They will say you are biased because I gave you the opportunity. Then what do we do? She turned toward him. I need you to testify. His breath hitched. Testify? Yes, she said. Come with me to the board hearing. Present your findings yourself. Speak directly to them. Tell them why this matters. Evan's pulse quickened. I am not qualified for that. I am a security guard. I do not even own a suit. You do not need a suit, she said gently. You need the truth. And you already have that. He ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed. Lila, I do not know if I can do this. She stepped closer, her voice steady and warm. Evan Cole, you analyzed a structural system that seasoned engineers could not solve in weeks. You faced every challenge I gave you without backing down. You stood your ground when Damon tried to push you out. If there is anyone who can speak with honesty and conviction, it is you. His heart pounded. And if I fail, then I fail with you, she said softly. But if you succeed, we succeed together. The room felt still for a long moment, the weight of her words sinking into the space between them. He finally nodded, breath unsteady. Okay, he whispered. I will do it. A relieved smile touched her face, the first genuine one he had seen all day. Thank you, Evan. She stepped back behind her desk. The hearing is tomorrow morning. Get some rest. You are going to need it. As he walked out of her office, his mind spinning, one thing was clear. He was no longer just a bystander in Hartwell Innovations. He was part of the fight now. And the outcome of tomorrow's battle could change both of their lives forever. The next morning arrived far sooner than Evan wished. But he showed up anyway, nerves coiled tightly inside him as he walked through the gleaming corridors toward the boardroom. He could feel the weight of the building pressing down on him, the hum of whispers from employees who had heard rumors of the hearing. He tried to steady his breathing. At the end of the hallway, Lila was waiting for him. She wore a charcoal gray suit that made her look unshakable, but when she turned toward him, he noticed the faint tension in her shoulders. You made it, she said softly. I said I would. He replied, trying to sound confident. Good, she said. Remember, you are not here to impress them. You are here to tell the truth. The double doors to the boardroom opened, revealing a long polished table surrounded by stern-faced board members. Damon Blackwell stood near the head of the table, arms crossed. He looked at Evan like he was an unwanted stain on an otherwise pristine surface. Lila stepped forward first. Members of the board, she said, before you vote on the continuation of the shelter initiative and the review of my leadership, there is someone who needs to speak. Damon scoffed. We already know who that is. Lila ignored him. Evan Cole, please. Evan swallowed hard and stepped to the center of the room. Dozens of eyes pinned him in place. He felt small, painfully aware of the difference in power between him and everyone in that room. But he forced himself to take a steady breath. My name is Evan Cole, he began, and yes, I am a security guard. A few board members exchanged looks. Evan continued, but I am also an engineering student. I study during the night shift because it is the only time I have left. And 3 days ago, Ms. Hart gave me a chance to prove myself. He placed the blueprint folder on the table and opened it. This is the structural analysis she asked me to complete. It covers load distribution, potential failure points, corrective reinforcement, and drainage redesign. I completed it in 72 hours. A board member leaned forward. And why should we trust your assessment? Because it is accurate, Evans said steadily. And because I have nothing to gain by lying. He pointed to the structural model. This design is not experimental. It is functional, and it can protect families and neighborhoods that face storm damage every year. Canceling this project does not save money. It costs lives. A hushed murmur rippled through the room. Damon stepped forward abruptly. This is absurd. We are not basing decisions on the testimony of some night guard who stumbled into the building. Before Evan could speak, Lila stepped in front of him. He did not stumble, she said sharply. I chose him because he has something most people overlook: determination, integrity, and clarity of mind. Damon's jaw tensed. This is not about him. This is about your leadership. Exactly, Lila replied. My leadership. And I am showing you what leadership looks like. It looks like giving opportunities to people who deserve them, not just people who already have them. She turned toward the board. You wanted proof of my judgment. Here it is. The room fell silent. Then, slowly, one board member cleared her throat. Mr. Cole, she said, your findings align with our independent data. Another nodded. The shelter project should move forward. Damon's face darkened. You cannot be serious. And regarding Ms. Hart's leadership, an older board member said, adjusting his glasses, we see no grounds for suspension. In fact, we see potential in her willingness to identify talent where others would not. Damon stepped forward aggressively. This is a mistake. The vote is final, the board chairman said firmly. Ms. Hart will continue as interim chief executive officer, with full authority. Lila released a breath that trembled slightly. Damon stared at her, furious, then turned sharply and exited the room. No one followed him. As the board members began gathering their papers, Lila slowly turned to Evan. For a moment, she said nothing, only searching his face. Then she whispered, You did it. Evan shook his head. We did it. She stepped closer, her voice thick with emotion. You not only saved the project, you saved my position. He felt a warmth spread through his chest. You gave me a chance. I just honored it. She smiled, a real, soft, unguarded smile. Evan, I want you to stay. Not as a temporary evaluator. As part of the engineering team. A paid position. Full access. And a mentorship under me. He stared at her, stunned. Are you serious? Completely. His voice cracked. Yes. Of course yes. She laughed gently and placed a hand on his arm. Welcome to Hartwell Innovations. As they stepped out of the boardroom together, the hallway felt brighter, the weight finally lifted. And though they both knew challenges still waited ahead, one thing was now certain. Their futures were no longer separate. They were aligned, intertwined by courage, opportunity, and the kind of respect that could grow into something deeper. But that would come later. Today was about victory, and the beginning of a new chapter neither of them had dared to dream of.